Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Afternoons with the Ambassador. And today, we're talking Mandalorian Chapter 12, The Siege. And folks, this was an absolute blast. This episode, and I will emphasize, was not filler whatsoever. This was a great episode, just like, well, so far every episode we've gotten this season of Mandalorian Season 2. And I'm going to do this in parts. We're going to talk non-spoiler stuff about the episode, and then I will go into a spoiler section for this review, for this stream, so I will give you all a heads up and everything before when I go into spoiler territory, so just fair warning now. But getting into the non-spoiler aspects of the episode, and I did take notes. I left my notes on my phone. My phone's on the other side of the room. 2 seconds. I am such a doofus. Oh, man. Okay. And I'm back. Anyway. All right. As I was saying, I took a lot of notes. I took some shots of the episode and everything, and we will get right into it. This episode picks up pretty much where it left off with last episode. Mandalorian has left Trask. He's got, to quote Captain Jack Sparrow, we have our heading. He's on his way to Corvus. But unfortunately, Razor Crest is jacked up. Razor Crest is severely jacked up. I'm sorry, that Mon Cala mechanic on Trask did a crappy job repairing the ship. And Mon Calamari are supposed to be really good shipwrights and mechanics. What the heck? Anyway, we start off with a little scene and everything at the beginning where the Mando and the yodeling of the child are trying to repair the ship. And the yodeling is in, the child is in a little big compartment that Mandalorian cannot get into by any stretch of the imagination. And he's like trying, there's a nice little bit of comedy at the beginning of this episode, which was nice, and it fit nicely. And Mando's trying to tell him, you put this wire here and you put this wire here instead of putting one wire in the opposite place. And what ends up happening, he's just a baby. He doesn't know any better. And he ends up shorting something out. And he's like, well, Mandalorian was like, well, that was worth a shot. And to the chat, Superior Hero Reviews, Cody, I hope you're doing well. I hope you finally have gotten your internet working again, man. I have missed you. I hope you're doing better. But and Mandalorian's like, well, we're just gonna head to Navarro. He's like, you want to see Kara and Grief again? And well, baby, go. The child goes, yeah, I want to see the nice lady and the nice guy again. They're nice. I like them. The child doesn't obviously speak for those of you who watch the episode, but anyhow, I digress. And I actually, hold on one second. I'll share my screen here. Here we go. Or do I want to save this for, I'll save this for the spoiler part of the review. But anyway, oh, good. Cody, that is excellent to hear. Glad to hear it and everything. But yeah, they end up going back to Navarro. I think we all kind of expected this because let's be candid. The Razor Crest was jacked the hell up. It was looking bad. It wasn't pretty. So they get to Navarro and Grief and Kara, they meet Mandalorian. You know what? I will bring up my pictures. I'll go ahead and do this now. Go away, iCloud. I don't need you right now. Because visual aids are always good. back over here to where y'all can see me. There we go. And as I said, we got our girl Cara Dune, and we got Grief and everything. And there was a scene and everything at the big, shortly before Mandalorian shows back up on Navarro. And Cara Dune is kicking ass, and it is awesome. It is glorious. It is beautiful. And I know I tweeted this out earlier. I added Gina Carano. I was like, Gina, you were rocking in this episode, and I hope this is not the only time this season we see you. I hope we see you in Grief again. And Mando gets there. He's like, how's my credit? And Grief is like, I think we can work something out. And he's like, we need some help. He's like, well, I can't really help y'all right now. He's like, the ship's going to take a little while to get fixed. And Mando's like, you're right. Okay, let's go. And they end up in fun little fact, and this is just a minor spoiler. Cara is actually now Marshal of Navarro, which I thought was really cool. But anyway, moving along. We get introduced to Mando's first mark right here. Mithral, I think was his name. And again, these are just minor spoilers, folks. I won't get into like the deep stuff until much later in my second part. But we see the town, we see the settlement, and gorgeous set. The set design, as always, is gorgeous on this show. And they end up dropping the child off and everything at a familiar location. It's actually where they had the showdown with Moff Gideon at the end of season 1 and everything. And he's like, Mando's like, I'm amazed to see this place still standing. And they're like, wait till you see the inside. And they've actually turned, well, I think was used to be a bar into a school. And you've got a protocol droid teacher, you've got a bunch of students, and Grief takes the child and everything, and he's like, and Mando's like, where he goes, I go. Grief's like, trust me, you'll be fine here, and where we're going, ain't no place for a kid. But just what I appreciate about this episode was the fact that we got to revisit some old faces. And I think got to see, and we got to have a nice little adventure, a little mission and everything with Grief and with Cara. But I don't want to go too much further into the episode because I want to save that for the spoiler part. For those of you that don't want anything spoiled, if you haven't watched the episode yet or anything, that's fine. But just talking in general about the episode. We had some nice pacing. We had some good world building here. There's some dialogue that gives us an idea of what's been going on Navarro since Mandalorian was there last. We find out that there's an old Imperial installation that apparently was linked to Moff Gideon when they kicked his butt and everything. He ended up leaving Navarro. I will say that the set design, as always, and anything in particular for the Imperial installation, the interior and the exterior was right on the numbers again. The other things I liked about this, let me pull up my notes. Hold on 1 second here. Any good reviewer takes notes. Yeah, talked about that. One thing I did want to mention, the fact that we see a alien race that we saw also in Star Wars Squadrons. For those of you that have played the game, the alien that is named Gunny in Squadrons, one of the same species, shows up in this episode as a mechanic as well. And let's see, what else? Sorry, guys, I've been up since early this morning, so please forgive me. One of the other things that I liked about this episode was, as I mentioned before, we got some good world building, particularly through dialogue. When Child is there in the school, the protocol droid is quizzing the students and everything, asking about different parts of the galaxy and everything, asking about the different trade routes and so on. And we do find out something interesting, and I'll see if I'll wonder if this carries through later on. But we find out that Coruscant is not the current capital of the New Republic. In fact, the capital is on Chandrila. I think that's proper pronunciation, which for those of you that may not remember, Chandrila was the home planet of Mon Mothma. And it's currently, and I think they actually mentioned this in Star Wars Squadrons, the fact that they've got the capital of the New Republic on Chandrila. Also, we get a nice little scene there in the school with the child, and he actually uses some of his force abilities because he's sitting next to a kid. The kid's eating some cookies, and he's like, "I want a cookie." Okay, well, Wookiee supremacy. I'm sorry, I disagree. So, but you're welcome to your opinion. But I didn't think it stunk. So, anyway, moving along. What I thought was interesting was the fact that, and I'm sure people are probably going to gripe about this, the child and everything seems to be running on his stomach, which most children do. And I know there was a lot of kerfuffle about the fact that the child was eating the eggs in chapter 10, and the fact that he stole the kid's cookies. But I thought it was a nice little comedic moment. I thought it was interesting. So, but we get to, like I said, we get to the part and everything where they are coming up on the Imperial installation, and I will say, oh, Wookiee supremacy, you're fine, bud. No worries. I didn't think you were. So, like I said, you're if you didn't like the episode, that's fine. Me myself, I enjoyed it thoroughly. I thought it was a good episode. Something I did want to comment on here. This is actually Mithral's speeder, or I guess it's Grief's speeder or somebody's speeder. It harkens very much back to the design of Luke's speeder, except it's souped up a little bit or anything. It's more of a modern design and everything, which I did like. It harkens back and everything to episode 4 where we see speeders. Even the sound of the engines and everything even reminds me of the sound design for the speeders that we saw in Naboo and so on. So, but anyway, we get to the Imperial installation, and Grief is like, I want to take this out and finally drive the Empire off-world so that this can be a safe planet. We can turn Navarro into a trade hub, which I thought was actually really cool. I mean, Grief is obviously a businessman, and he wants what's best for Navarro, so I can respect that. But there's a lot more to this base than what appears, anything at first. And I don't want to get into massive spoilers. I will say that the action and everything in this particular part at this point, when they're in the Imperial installation, it was very fast paced. But it was paced well. It was very reminiscent of action we've seen in other Star Wars media. I would compare it to some of the infiltration of the first Death Star in A New Hope, and so on. Hey, Mountains Elysium, good to see you, bud. And I'll see you in a couple hours. Always a pleasure, bud. Thank you. But again, the set design very much harkens back to old set design, previous set design we've seen for Imperial installations and so on. And again, I can't help but appreciate the level of care that they are taking and keeping continuity with set design. That's something that I really appreciate. One other thing I will comment on. This episode doesn't really have that space western feel like the previous episodes did. This felt more like a pure Star Wars episode or anything, but that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. But something I did want to comment on. They did want to keep one aspect of the space western feel, and that was all of our main good guys were using blaster pistols instead of blaster rifles. And that you see that very commonplace in old Western television shows and old black and white Westerns like John Wayne and so on. So I thought that was a very nice touch and everything. I thought that was something that still tied back to the Western aesthetic for the episode or for the series. But anyway, um, again, the music top notch and everything. Ludwig Göransson, this guy, I don't know where he's been hiding all this time, but Ludwig, wherever you've been, thank you for giving us great music for this series. I mean, top notch right across the board. But I think really that's, and to the chat, Robert Rose Jr., good afternoon, sir. Thank you for popping in. I just wrapped up the non-spoiler part of my review of Mandalorian. I think I'm going to move into the spoiler part now. So if you're not wanting this spoiled, if you haven't watched this episode yet, I would recommend that you click away now. But if you don't care about spoilers, or if you're just here for the review, whatever the case, we're going to get into spoilers now. A couple of things I did want to bring up. I'll go ahead and click on ahead here. Got another shot here of our trio and everything. And as I mentioned, they're all using blaster pistols. There is a part and everything when they're trying to get into the Imperial installation. Mando does use his rocket pack and everything, or his rocket pack, to zoop up to the upper level of the Imperial base. I think I got a shot of that as well. Yep, there we go. I will say, I did like the design of the Imperial base. Very, very, very cool and everything. Very reminiscent of older other bases we've seen in the past. I will say it does remind me of the installation that we saw in Rogue One, where Galen Erso and the other scientists were stationed at. For those of you that, I don't know if you can make this out, you got a couple turbo laser batteries. These look like and possibly anti-aircraft batteries. There's another one further down here, I think. Here's the shuttle bay, obviously, and I think these are just different modules or anything that are like housing. And then, of course, you've got the main command center up here above the landing bay. But I did like this was something else I really dug. Yeah. And Robert Rose, like River Song, I don't mind spoilers. Okay, and I get that reference, Doctor Who. Wookiee Supremacy, did they really need to reuse every single Stormtrooper line from every single movie? It didn't bother me, honestly. It was a little bit of fan service and everything. And that's, fan service for me. It can be a detriment, or it can be a good thing. I think they used it appropriately here. So it was just a little wink and a nod, but it didn't feel forced. It felt very organic to the situation. So that, for me, I didn't have a big issue. But and just fair warning, now this is going to be the spoiler part of the review. There's not much more I can say about this or anything without going into spoilers. So here we go, spoilers. Okay, let me bounce back over here. All right. We have Mando and Cara Dune and obviously Grief and everything. They infiltrate the base along with Mithral. I think that's how they pronounce his name. And they're like, we want to set the reactor to go critical and destroy the base because it's got a lot of heavy weaponry and so on. And they figure it's just got a skeleton crew. There's not a whole lot of people in the base, but turns out there's a lot more Imperials than is expected. But anyway, they set the reactor to go critical. There's some nice little comedy there and anything with Mithril. They like, we'll watch the door. You set the reactor to go boom, to go kablooey, and they do. But then they start going through the base and they come across this lab, and you've got these two lab techs here, and there's some very interesting stuff going on at this Imperial facility. Let me bounce over here. And we've got these tanks along the wall with all of these. I'm sorry, the pictures aren't better. Everything did the best I could, but you get the idea. There are these tanks with these very grotesque experiments inside. And Mando's like, I don't like it here. And I can't necessarily say I blame him. But then we get a hologram of Dr. Pershing from back in the last season. And he's talking to Gideon. Or giving a report to Moff Gideon. And they're like, wait a minute, this has got to be an old recording. Gideon is supposed to be dead. And Mithril says, no. Gideon's still alive. Unfortunately. And Mando's like, I gotta get out of here. And they're like, we'll meet you back at town. Best thing for you to do is zip out. And we get a nice little chase scene and everything where Mando's dodging a bunch of stormtroopers. So, and of course, it's intense. It gets really intense. Grief and Kara and Mithril, they get back to the landing bay and so on. And okay. And this is another shot that I really liked and everything. We got Mandalorian here. He just took out these two Imperials. And we've got a bunch of TIE fighters and everything with their wings folded down. Again, I like the design of the TIE fighters where they can have their wings folded down. I think that's really cool. I think this is something that they do for more. I get the impression that these are modified and everything for like planetary or atmospheric service, possibly, or maybe just for easier storage. That's a possibility as well. But the interesting thing is, and I'll backtrack just a little. Hold on 1 second, guys. We find out, okay, went too far. One more. There we go. We find out that they have been doing genetic experimentation. And apparently they have been using midichlorian-rich blood to try and they're experimenting with midichlorian blood transfusions into different people. We don't know exactly why, and I do have a few theories, but I'll go into my theories and so on and everything after I get done with the main part of the review here. Yeah, Robert Rose and everything, and I'm going to get into that when I talk about that here shortly. So, but apparently Pershing, the reason that they were so intent on getting the child back is because his blood is rich in midichlorians. Now, we haven't had reference to midichlorians since episode 1. Everything, the Phantom Menace. But what I found of interest here, this was a lot of world building in just a few minutes' time. And that was something that I found intriguing because you get little blurbs here, you get little blurbs there, and you start to put the pieces together. Yeah, and Ethan Brookholder, good to see you, bud. I highly recommend it if you don't have Disney Plus. If you just want to get for Mandalorian is definitely worth your time. I don't know when they're going to be bringing Mandalorian out on DVD or Blu-ray. I'm hoping it'll be soon eventually, I would think. Knowing Disney, it'll probably be a little bit, but all good things come to those who wait. But what I found of interest here was the fact that we finally get a little more information as to why the child is so important to the Empire, or at least to Moff Gideon and his bunch. As I mentioned, they're doing transfusions, they're infusing normal human beings and everything or whatever with midichlorian rich blood. And obviously the child and everything has a lot of that. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes down the road. Now, of course, Grief and Kara and Mithral, they get out of the base. I'm going to pop over here. And this is actually something that we see when they come back into the base. It's called a Trexel Marauder. And Mithral's like, do you realize how much one of those would be in mint condition? And it is in mint condition. But we get a nice little chase scene as everybody's hightailing it out of the Imperial base. And I'll pop over here. Here's a nice side shot of the Marauder. I love this vehicle. I would love to have a black series of it or something, or even just a Hot Wheel. I don't care. But I love the design of this vehicle. Very, very cool. And they're cornered there on the landing bay and everything up here. And Kara gets a grin on her face, and Grief and Mithral are like, what the heck are you planning on doing? And she sends the Marauder over the edge. And you get the she's got this little smirk on her face like, this is gonna be a lot of fun. And Grief and Mithral are like, holy crap, we're gonna die. And we did a very cool chase scene and everything where, of course, they land safely. Unfortunately, the speeder gets trashed. It's completely and utterly trashed. And I absolutely love this. This chase scene was so much fun. You've got them outrunning Imperial stormtroopers and so on. And it's an absolute thrill ride. You get it reminds me a little bit of a chase scene like you would see in Indiana Jones, honestly, is what this puts me in the mind of. Is a chase scene from Indiana Jones, one of the Indiana Jones movies or something like that. But they finally shake the speeders. Here come the ties. And again, you see them lifting off. They're going after Grief and Kara and Mithral. The cool and I love this explosion. Absolutely love this explosion and everything. This is obviously the destruction of the Imperial installation, which they succeed in doing. But I absolutely this for me was a great shot. Absolutely loved it. And then of course we get a nice little shootout between the Marauder and the ties. Grief is actually able to take out one tie, but they're in open space now. Everything. And here comes our boy. Razor Crest all fixed up and shiny again, and it's glorious. And we get a nice little dogfight and everything. Here's a nice little shot. Everything. And then I love this shot right here. Everything really, really cool and everything. Mando is doing this, has almost stalled and everything, the Razor Crest, kind of like what he did in Chapter 10 and everything. And he's just holding there for a minute, and then he closes in on the last TIE fighter and just blasts the puppy. So later on and everything, after the dogfight's over and done with, Mando's like, I've really got to go. I got to book it. Can't stay. And Grief and Kara are like, we'll take it easy. We actually have a reappearance by the one older Rebel Alliance pilot. And no, it's not Dave Filoni. This was the other guy that was with him and everything in Chapter 10. And takes the report from Grief, and he's out there talking to Kara and everything, and he's like trying to convince her to come back to the Rebel Alliance. For those you don't remember, Kara used to be a part of the Rebel Alliance military, which she didn't want anything to do with them. But he leaves this interesting little badge and everything, and I love the design of it. It's really cool looking and everything. But moving on from there, and you get to wonder: is she going to go back, or is she going to stay where she's at? Is she happy where she's at? So that'll be an interesting plot point and everything to pick up on down the road. But then we get a nice shot of an imperial cruiser. I can't remember the particular name of this class or anything, but I've seen it before. I've seen it in Star Wars Squadrons and everything, and some cutscenes and so on. Very, very cool. And we come to find out that one of the mechanics and everything has planted a tracking device and everything on the Razor Crest. And you got this Imperial officer talking very smugly to anything like, you will be well rewarded in the new era. And she, of course, leaves the bridge, and looky who shows up. Mr. Moff Gideon himself. And he's like, is everything in place? She's like, yep, trackers on the ship. We know we can track them wherever we want to. And he's like, excellent. And then we have a zoom out, and he's apparently in some sort of bay there on the ship. And this is one of the things I really want to discuss with you all, because I looked at this and for a moment I couldn't quite figure out. I couldn't remember, but that finally dawned on me what these are in these slots. Unless I'm wrong, and I could be, these are Dark Troopers. For those of you that who aren't familiar with that concept, Dark Troopers are actually they were first introduced in for heaven's sakes, one of the stories with Kyle Katarn. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, and I'm kicking myself for it. But essentially, Dark Troopers are the Empire's equivalent to battle droids, except a lot tougher, a lot more heavily armored and everything. I think they got some inspiration possibly and everything if they wanted to tie this into like the Clone Wars and everything. They got some inspiration for these from the super battle droids that the Trade Federation and the Separatists used. But it'll be interesting to see how these fellas and everything play out down the road. But if I want to speculate, and this might be where this is probably where I'm going to go with the remainder of my review, is going into speculation. We know Moff Gideon is still alive. Obviously, we found that out in the last episode with the hologram between him and that one Imperial officer on the Gazanti freighter, the Imperial Gazanti freighter. Now we see more of Gideon's forces. He's got all these Dark Troopers and everything at his disposal. We know that the Empire has been doing genetic research. And here's the thing, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing this. I might bring it back up later. We know that the Empire has been doing genetic research in the past. They have been dealing with cloning and everything else. This goes all the way back to the prequel era. We know that Palpatine and Plagueis, or Sidious and Plagueis, were tinkering in genetic research and everything. And then, of course, you got the Kaminoans that were brought in to create the Clone Army with Jango Fett. One other thing I want to bring into this is the Force Unleashed 2, the video game, where Vader is trying to recreate Galen Merrick, trying to recreate a Force-sensitive clone. Now, if I had to venture a guess, and that's all this is and everything, what they're trying to do is trying to infuse non-Force sensitive people with midichlorian rich blood. This might be their way of trying to circumnavigate around creating other Force sensitive beings. Now, whether they're doing this to create Snoke, or whether it's early research, or it's continuation of research that Palpatine had started back when the Empire was still up and running at full strength and he was still around, whether this was just a pet project of his, We're not entirely sure. But the thing is, genetic research is something the Empire has been doing for a very long time. It is not something that just popped up one day. So I will be interested to see where now Dr. Pershing and everything makes one comment and everything in that hologram. That he couldn't withdraw any more. He couldn't withdraw more than he already had midi-chlorian rich blood from the child without killing it. So the question becomes, how far are they willing to go with this research and everything if they are able to get their hands on the child again? That'll be something I imagine they'll answer later on. We're halfway through this season. And that's what I'm going to say. This is something they'll either answer late towards the end of this season or season 3, because I would assume there's going to be a season 3 for this. But I think something that people, for those of us that are part of the Star Wars universe, that we have forgotten is genetic research is not something new to the Empire. It's not been seen except for in Attack of the Clones and in the Clone Wars animated series and everything. It's not something that we have had a great deal of exposure to. And well, the only other place that we have seen it was in Force Unleashed 2, when Vader, as I mentioned before, was trying to recreate another Force-sensitive clone of Killer. So we've got a through line here of the Empire doing genetic research. This could just be the next step in the research that they're doing. It could be a different offshoot of the research that they're doing, where they're trying to figure out if they can infuse non-sensitive, non-force sensitive people to make them force sensitive if they infuse enough midi-chlorian blood and everything, midi-chlorian rich blood into a normal person. And obviously we saw in those tanks all the different failures, or at least 2 of them, where it didn't quite work. Now, I know some people have expressed some concern that this is them trying to shoehorn in some rationale for some of the stuff that they put into the sequels. I'm not going to be an alarmist. I'm going to wait and see what they do with this. If that is what they're trying to do, okay, as long as it doesn't stifle the story that they're telling with The Mandalorian itself. That, for me, is not a huge problem. But now if it starts to become an issue, then we'll address it when we get to that point. But for right now, I'm seeing a furthering of a plot point or a story element that was established all the way back in the prequels and in other EU material, like with Force Unleashed and like with Darth Plagueis and so on, and with Clone Wars. So, excuse me. But that all being said, in terms of if I want to rate this episode, and I'm often generous with my ratings, and y'all may think I'm just shilling, but you know what? I'm not shilling. I'm a fan, and I love this. I have been enjoying this series thus far, and everything. So, regardless of who's involved in it, and everything, because I know there's one person in particular most people are not thrilled with, but you know what? I'm going to look past that. I don't care. Personally, if I was going to rate this particular episode, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10, give or take, and everything. The only reason I say that is I kind of hoped that we would get Ahsoka in this episode, but I'm okay with the fact that we didn't. Were there a few little things that bothered me, like with Wookiee supremacy said and everything, them reusing all the dialogue and everything for stormtroopers in the episode? I can understand where some person might not appreciate that, might seem shoehorned. Personally, I thought it was fairly organic and everything, because when you're trained in the Imperial military, you use similar orders and everything. I see that just as keeping uniformity within Imperial ranks. So that for me doesn't bother me. Obviously, we'll probably get Ahsoka in chapter 13. So that's a win. That in my books, that's a win. I'm I'm looking forward to that. I'll be interested to see where they go forward and everything. When we'll get Moff Gideon and his attack on the Mandalorian. I'll be interested to see if they bring what's the Marshal from Chapter 9, Cobb Vanth. Escaped me for a minute, and I'm hopeful that they'll. This is not the only time this season that we'll see Grief and Kara. One other thing I did want to comment on that particular point with Cara Dune. There's a scene and everything at the beginning of the episode where Kara is gone down into the old Mandalorian culvert or anything where the other Mandalorians were stationed at. You actually see the outline of where the Mandalorian crest, this puppy right here, everything has been removed. So we don't know who removed it per se, but there's some bandits that have set up shop and everything in the old Mandalorian culvert. And she just goes in and just kicks their ass, and it's glorious. I mean, yeah, we see her using a blaster, we see her driving the Traxel Marauder and everything, but it's good to see her just kicking butt. Yeah, Robert and everything. I agree. I agree with that and everything. So, and the main bad guy, Darth Jar Jar, is hinted in the prequels. That could have worked and everything, but that's another discussion for another time. But honestly, folks, that's my review and everything. Well, I do want to say one more thing. Gina Carano has been getting a lot of grief on Twitter, and quite frankly, I don't understand why. She is a very talented actress. She has a history with MMA, and we get to see that showcase at the beginning of this episode. She has not lost a step. She can still kick ass with the best of them. So, for all the grief she's getting, I'll just say this briefly. I stand with Gina Carano. So, Kylo as Snoke's secret apprentice. Yeah, that could have worked, Robert. That totally could have worked. But anyways, folks, I hope you enjoyed my review. If you did, make sure you smash that like button down below. If you're not a regular subscriber and you like the content I'm putting out here on my channel, make sure and hit that subscribe button. If you want, and make sure to share this out with everybody and everything who is following The Mandalorian. If you think what I had to say was of benefit, share it with them. Say, hey, go check out this guy, the Ambassador, and hear what he has to say about the latest episode of Mandalorian. A couple of updates real quick. In a little under an hour and a half at 2:30 Central Time, I'll be back with you all again and everything for my Babylon 5 review with classic comics, Mountains of Elysium, Finn Wolf, and Zod Rider and everything. And we'll be talking about the episode there, All the Honor Lies and everything. And that'll be at 2:30 Central Time. And I have included the link to that stream, everything down in the description. So if you want to tune in for that one, if you're a fan of Babylon 5, by all means, anything, hope to see you all there. And then later on tonight and everything at 8 p.m. Central Time, I'll be over on Orange Hat Reviews channel, where I'm going to be joining him and everything, and a few other people for another versus stream. We'll be debating who would win a fight between the two Hellions, Spawn and Hellboy. So, and very quickly to the chat. And Big Geek, good to see you, bud. Hope you're doing well. No, missed you. Yes, of course. I always miss my friends. And thank you. I appreciate it. But that all being said, folks, I hope you all enjoyed this review. And I will see you all later this afternoon and hopefully this evening. And as they say, this is the way. And until next time, this is the Ambassador, signing off.
I have always been